My name is Jeanette Biro, and I live in Langley, BC. I am a kinesiologist, and I also hold a sports science diploma as well. Um, okay, so looking back at my past, I have always been someone who had a huge desire to be athletic and do anything the boys do. Honestly, if the boys were going to dirt bike, I got a dirt bike. If somebody was going to run a marathon, well, then I had to try running the marathon. I wanted to understand unlimitedness. And so that was always my motivator, was to do. And by about the age of 17, I started to recognize that I was having some health limitations, which were all connected for me. It's back to menstruation. And by the age of 17, I had dropped my iron level down to a ferritin of 1. And still trying to be a competitive figure skater at that time, it made it really, really difficult to even get through a program without passing out. And having no idea, even at that time, we didn't really know why my iron was low. My coach didn't recognize or understand the idea of low iron. So there was the emotional aspect of it where I was guilted into not being fit enough. So there was a physiological limitation combined with a mental pressure of not being good enough, which really compounded over the years. So anemia really became a limiter in my life, and also something that I began to fuse with as to kind of who I was. I was the anemic girl, you know? And so over time, that led me to being the sickly girl. Yet here I am still trying to hike and still trying to, I don't even know how I did it, but I hiked a mountain on 3 ferritin, you know? And so that's kind of where my past got me. And my past really, from the age of 17 being at a ferritin level of 1, I never really got better than approximately 12. And these are numbers for some people that don't make sense, but I'm sitting now at around 140 and life is good. So 12, not so good. 1, really not good. And if I fast forward to even just several months ago, in the summer, I had been asked, or I'd done some blood work, and I asked my doctor, I was like, so I'm sitting back at a 3 here, not feeling good at all. My capacity to be a good mom was limited because I was the napping mom. You know, my kids would go to school and they would say, when they would ask, what does your mom do? My mom talks to people and she sleeps. It's like, right? I'm like, I want to be the mom that's like, my mom's awesome. She does this and this and this, but I was a sleeping mom. So anyways, I asked my doctor, I said, listen, we're at 3. I'm still bleeding out. What can you help me with? We need to do something different. She's like, yeah, we do, right? Yeah. I was like, what happened? And kind of a blank stare. And I said, what happens when I get below 1? Is there a 0? And she's like, no, it doesn't happen that way. I was like, okay. So they did the standard thing of, if a girl has problems with her female parts, put her on the pill, right? So I was like, fine, I did that in my teenage years, but went back on the pill, and it amplified things, which basically decreased my barely functional health into poorly functioning health. That by the time September rolled around, I was at a -1 ferritin. My doctor was like, so I guess you can get -1. I was like, girl, right? And which led to heart problems and heart palpitations. I couldn't walk down my hallway without having to take a rest at the end of the hall. And we're talking about like 12-foot long hallway. I couldn't talk for long without having to rest. I started doing client work that I could do over the phone, laying down in bed. And by the very end of it, before I started doing iron infusions, which is what, really started to get things better, I was at a super high risk of heart attack. And the doctor was like, well, you just have to rest until your infusions. So the reason why I explain all that is because I wasn't getting help. I was getting Band-Aid answers. And the Band-Aid answers just don't work for me. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. And so I had run into Carmen. I had connected with Carmen several years before on a DNA project, and we really learned about DNA for health and fitness. It was limited in the number of genes back in that time, but we learned a lot about it. And, then different things happened and careers went different ways. I had babies, and then this DNA project that I was so motivated about came back around again. And it was really interesting how it came around, because it came back right at the time where I was at my crux of where I remember one night, you know how you try to find the positives in any situation? You're like, you know what? No matter what's happening, I can find a positive here. And I remember one day I was like, well, life's pretty crappy. Can't really do much. I'm like, but I guess if I'm meant to die because I have a heart attack, at least I'll know what it's like to maybe get shocked back to life. Like, it sounds silly, right? But that was the positive I could pull from it, right? And so I'm in that moment, and then that's when a dear friend of mine who I speak with as well, Mark Campbell, phoned me and he said, listen, Jeanette, you have to talk to Matt and Carmen. He's like, Carmen's come around again. She's still working on the DNA. She works with Matt Cleary. You don't even know. He just kept saying, you don't even know. You need to talk to these guys. I told them all about you. And I was like, what? You did? And he's like, yeah, they really think they can help you. And so this was this huge shift in energy for me, because at this point I was lost, because the medical community wasn't doing anything for me, right? I had to fight so hard to even get iron infusions. So here I was sitting at this point of change. You feel that energy in the room, and something's going to be different, but you don't quite know yet. And so Mark really encouraged me to call Matt and Carmen, and they were gracious enough to take the time with me to hear my story and tell me some of the things that they figured it could be. And it was amazing, because the knowledge that both of them have is phenomenal. It's like an encyclopedia, just by talking to them. And within that short conversation, I was able to get understandings of things that I could fix, because until that point, I just felt like I was bleeding to death and I couldn't stop it. I just couldn't stop it, so it was. And Matt's like, yeah, it doesn't have to be this way. He's like, I bet you this and this is occurring, and I bet you maybe you have this gene mutation. And he's like, oh, you're doing this. He's like, you probably need this, and all these different quick things that he was able to fire off. And I was like, seriously, like, can this really be? And so then I went back to what I experienced with the DNA project I'd been involved in before, and I was like, I really believed in it. And it's Carmen bringing it around again. I was like, I know the quality behind what she stands for. So I thought about it, and then it was just this feeling of, I need to do this if I'm going to save my life and change my life, because I spent almost 2 decades being the tired person and the scrawny, feeble girl who thinks she's a beast. Like, I think I could bench press anybody, is what I think inside. But to be able to bring that to fruition, I decided to jump in. And it was amazing how, in combination with the iron infusions, is what really started me on. It gave me a foundation to build from. But what I learned was how much I had to build after that. The iron infusions, which is a medical thing, wasn't just the fix. It would get me back up to a point to fix my body and have my body start working for me. And that's the beautiful thing about this is we get into the science of epigenetics, where epigenetics is the ability to change the effect of your genes based on what you think, feel, eat. And food is the biggest piece of what changes our bodies. And yes, we all know that, but do we really know that? Those things you think but do you actually really know the reality of it? Like, food makes such a difference on how your whole body expresses, and so I really started to learn that as I started to watch my body change. I went from, at my worst, I could maybe get in 600 calories a day. Not because I didn't want to eat, I wanted to eat, and I was starving. But I was so in this weird mess of how my body and my hormones were working that, like, I couldn't eat. I would eat and I would throw up. Not because I wanted to, but it just would reject it, And so I went from becoming known as the girl that doesn't eat a lot again to now you should see the portions of things that I eat. It's phenomenal. I love bringing out my dishes of what my meals are at family dinners and being like, check this out, and I hoover the whole plate down. And with that, my body's changing and my hormones are changing, and the way my whole body reacts even to my menstrual cycle is changing, which changes my outlook and changes my belief in myself. And the stuff that I can do in the gym now is just, I'm becoming that person I always knew I could, and the person that I was when I was a youngster before I started menstruating. I'm becoming that again. And not to say that I want to take away from any of my experiences, because those experiences of being anemic and being that depleted and wrestling with the medical system has really taught me to be an advocate for people to look outside of what standard medicine has to offer. Look at the things that are being brought to the forefront now, which is why I'm so passionate to share about the DNA. Because not only am I a little bit of a book nerd who likes to know sciencey stuff, at the same time I can really share the value that I see in this because of what it has done for me. Yeah, my whole body is an entirely different machine now. So and I really got to credit that to the DNA. The DNA, my DNA, it's not a fad diet. I'm not trying to follow something else. I'm following what I need to do. And I'm really lucky that I have two coaches that are so informed. And like I don't think there's a question I could ask that they can't answer, with not even just an answer, but an answer as to why and how, and then even a scientific article if I need it. Like it answers my body, but it answers my mind. So what I could say to anybody, if you're kind of on the fence thinking about, should I do this DNA thing or not, I can tell you that before I finally started the diet, when I was kind of waiting to see what my DNA would say, I remember I got to a point where I was like, and I'm educated in fitness and the understandings of how nutrition works for the most part, and I didn't even know what to eat anymore. And I'm thinking like I should know what to eat, and I'm like I don't even know what works for me anymore. I don't know what diet I should be. Should I have high fat, low fat? Should I have high protein? Should I be like I didn't even know anymore because I tried a bunch of different things and nothing was working. And that's why the DNA is so beautiful, because it's entirely about you. You want to know how to eat for your body, for your optimum health, for your optimum being, to change the genetic patterns that then get passed down to your family for generations to come. Like it all comes from your DNA. And we're so lucky that we live in the world now that we have the ability to get that information. So if health and wellness and longevity is important to you, then the DNA is just a fabulous, fabulous way to go about it.